Thanks for joining us today. We've got a lot of ground to cover in the Valley, so get your coffee ready, put those headphones on, and let's dive deep into our sources.
Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we have a mission for you. We are taking on Psalm 23.
Ah, yes. Probably the most famous poem in human history.
Right. I mean, it's everywhere. You've probably seen it printed on millions of throw pillows or stitched into wall hangings.
Funeral programs, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. It's so ubiquitous.
It really is, but what if I told you that at its exact mathematical center, this poem isn't about peace at all?
Wait, really?
Yeah. It's actually a poem about profound trauma, deep darkness, and facing literal death.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because you know how you can see a famous painting so many times, like, say, the Mona Lisa on a coffee mug or a tote bag, that you actually stop seeing it?
Right, it just becomes visual white noise.
Exactly. You recognize the shape of it, but the actual genius of the brushstrokes is completely invisible to you.
Yeah, you have to actively force yourself to step back.
You do. You have to strip away the pop culture baggage and look at the canvas like you've never seen it before. So our goal today is to uncover why these ancient 6 verses resonate so universally. And to do that, we have to move way past the familiar, fluffy sheep imagery.
Definitely.
Reading this text, for most of us, is like listening to a famous song you've heard in elevators your whole life. But today, we are going to look at the mathematical perfection of the sheet music to see why it actually works.
I love that analogy, and we actually have some really fascinating sources to help us decode this today.
Oh, we really do.
Yeah, so we'll be impartially examining these structural, grammatical, and historical facets of the text, synthesizing all these diverse perspectives. We're pulling from an academic linguistic paper by W. Creighton Marlow.
Which gets super technical, by the way.
Very technical. We also have a theological blog post by Jeremy R. Geerdes on some hidden pronoun shifts, an in-depth devotional from Grace Bible Church, and this is my favorite, a 4th century sermon by St. Augustine.
It's quite the lineup. But before we even get into the literary architecture, our sources suggest we need to clearly establish the characters. Context is just everything here.
Right. Who are we actually talking about?
Exactly. And according to the Grace Bible Church devotional, Psalm 23 doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It sits very purposefully between 2 other psalms.
Right. The placement matters.
It really does. You have Psalm 22, which is all about intense suffering. I mean, it literally starts with, my God, why have you forsaken me?
The cross, basically.
Yeah. And then you have Psalm 24, which is about the triumphant King of Glory.
So Psalm 23 is, well, it's an in-between time.
Right.
It's the messy daily reality between suffering and ultimate triumph. And the Lord mentioned in the very first verse, that's Yahweh, the great I am.
Which means what exactly in this context?
Well, it indicates an unchanging, ever-present nature. The guide isn't someone who was or will be, but simply Ias. He is entirely self-sufficient.
Which is a stark contrast to the other character in this poem, the sheep.
Oh, completely.
The Grace Bible source really takes down the majesty of the sheep. I mean, we think of them as these cute, fluffy clouds on legs.
Right, but historically and practically, they are defenseless, dumb, and dirty.
They really are. They can't clean themselves like cats or dogs. They have no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs.
Nothing. And they are famously terrified of moving water.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's why the text specifies that the shepherd leads them beside still waters. If the water is rushing, the sound and the movement will panic a sheep to the point where it will literally stand on the bank and die of thirst out of fear.
Wait, just out of fear?
Just out of fear. It needs the shepherd to physically dam up a quiet pool just so it can drink.
That is wild. And then there's the very real agricultural concept of the cast sheep.
Oh, yes. The cast sheep.
A cast sheep is one that has somehow managed to roll over onto its back. Like maybe it's too top-heavy with wool, or it finds a weird little depression in the ground.
And it just gets
completely stuck, feet flailing in the air. And if the shepherd doesn't come along and physically right the sheep, gas is built up in its stomach and it will just die there.
or get picked off by predators.
Right. It literally cannot save itself. But here's where it gets really interesting for me, and I have to push back a little on this imagery.
Okay, let's hear it.
When you lay it all out like that, isn't it a bit insulting to be called a sheep?
I mean, yeah, to a modern listener.
Right. Humans usually prefer to think of ourselves as lions or wolves or eagles. We want to be the apex predator in our own story. Calling me a defenseless, dirty animal that gets stuck on its back feels like, I don't know, a slight.
Well, If we connect this to the bigger picture, admitting vulnerability is the required entry point for the entire text.
How so?
It is entirely countercultural to the modern ego, right? We are obsessed with self-reliance, but you cannot have the shepherd's provision without acknowledging the sheep's absolute dependence.
You know, it makes me think of how we navigate the world today. We all walk around with smartphone GPS in our pocket.
Oh, sure.
And we like to think we are these independent, capable explorers. But the second we lose a cell signal in a new city,
It's total panic.
total panic.
Yeah.
We realize we have no idea how to get to a restaurant 3 miles away. We are basically crying on a curb.
That's a great modern parallel.
We instinctively get lost. We need the guide just to function.
Exactly. And admitting that you are the sheep without a signal is the required entry point. The beauty of the poem only unlocks when the ego is removed.
Okay, so if acknowledging our utter dependence as sheep is the entry point, how did the ancient poet actually construct this message? Because the way this was written is, well, it's mind-blowing.
It really is. And this brings us to W. Creighton Marlow's academic paper.
The structural one.
Right. Marlow points out a major issue that has plagued Western commentators for centuries. See, Western minds look for linear outlines.
Like a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yes, we want a neat bullet point list.
Yeah.
First we do this, then we do this.
Right.
And because of that Western projection, many scholars have historically argued that Psalm 23 is awkwardly fragmented.
Fragmented how?
Well, they say verses 1 through 4 use a shepherd metaphor, pastures, waters, valleys.
Okay.
But then verses 5 and 6 randomly switch to a host and banquet metaphor.
Oh, right. The you prepare a table before me part.
Exactly. Scholars ask, why are we suddenly eating at a table in the presence of enemies? What does a dinner party have to do with green pastures?
It does seem like a weird pivot when you read it linearly.
But Marlow says that's just us projecting our modern brains onto ancient Eastern poetry. He argues the poem is actually a careful conceptual chiasm.
A chiasm. Okay, for those who haven't taken a literary theory class recently, what is that?
Think of it as a mirror. The ideas map out symmetrically as A, B, C, B prime, A prime.
Oh, got it.
The first idea reflects the last idea, the second reflects the second to last, and they all point inward to a unique center.
But wait, are we really supposed to believe that an ancient shepherd writing poetry thousands of years ago was doing complex structural math? I mean, that feels like a stretch.
It's a very common skepticism. But ancient Eastern oral traditions relied heavily on structure for memorization. And Marlow actually proves this symmetry using Masoretic accents and Hebrew meter.
Hold on, Masoretic accents. What exactly are those?
Great question. The Masoretes were Jewish scribes working in the early Middle Ages.
Okay.
To ensure the Hebrew text was read, chanted, and interpreted correctly, they added a system of tiny symbols accents above and below the ancient consonants.
Like little musical notes?
Exactly like musical notes and punctuation marks.
Right.
Marlow uses these ancient grammatical markers to show that the meter of the poem is literally 4, 6, 5, 5, then a central 6, and then back out 5, 5, 6, 4.
Wow. Wait, really? The syllable counts mirror each other perfectly?
Yes. The math proves it's entirely intentional. The outer layers, A and A prime, represent complete and continual provision. The inner layers, B and B prime, represent purposeful restoration.
So what does this all mean for us reading it today? I like to think of a chiasm like a layer cake.
A layer cake.
Yeah. In a linear outline, you read from top to bottom, and the climax is usually at the end. But in a chiasm, the most important part isn't the frosting on the outside layers. It's the unique filling right in the exact middle.
That's a perfect way to look at it. And what's fascinating here is that the exact middle of this poem, the absolute climax, is verse 4.
The dark valley.
Yes, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. The center of the poem is not the idyllic green pastures. The center is the deep, dark valley.
See, that structure completely shifts how you experience the poem. It forces you to realize that the dark predicament wasn't a mistake.
No, not at all.
It wasn't some detour on the map. It was precisely the author's focal point all along. The entire poem rotates around this one anchor. Never fear, the divine shepherd is always near.
And if verse 4 is the mathematical and thematic center, the author does something else brilliant to signal that we've reached the climax.
Oh, the pronoun shift. This brings in Jeremy R. Geardis' work, which actually gave me goosebumps.
It is so subtle, but so powerful.
Let me just look at the text here. Okay, so in the first half, verse 1 says, he makes me lie down. Verse 2, he leads me. Verse 3, he restores my soul.
All third-person pronouns.
Right. The writer is talking about God to an audience.
But look what happens at verse 4, the exact center of our chiasm.
For you are with me, your rod and your staff.
Oh, wow.
The grammar completely flips.
It does.
The author stops talking about God and abruptly starts talking to God.
Precisely.
The author immediately switches to the second person, using you and your exactly 5 times to perfectly mirror the first half. For you are with me, your rod and your staff.
So he stops talking about God and starts talking directly to him.
Yes. To illustrate this, think about a toddler riding on a train for the very first time.
Okay.
The sun is shining, the train is rolling through the countryside, and the toddler is happily walking up and down the aisle, talking to the other passengers about his dad. My dad bought me this ticket. My dad is sitting right over there.
Sure. Very proud.
Right. But the absolute second that train enters a dark tunnel and the cabin goes pitch black, what does that toddler do?
He panics.
He runs back, grabs his dad's leg, and talks directly to him. Daddy, it's dark. Darkness forces proximity. It basically turns theology into prayer.
Wow. Here's where it gets really interesting, because there's an analogy about rock climbing that perfectly captures this transition from theoretical to experiential trust.
Oh, I love this one.
Right. If you're learning to rock climb, you can stand on the solid ground, look at your climbing harness, read the tag, and intellectually say, yes, I trust this equipment. I understand the tensile strength of the nylon ropes.
Right. It's easy on the ground.
That is theoretical faith. But you only experientially trust that harness the moment your foot slips off the rock wall, you start free falling, and the harness actually has to catch your physical weight.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals something really profound about human resilience. The dark valley strips away our illusions of self-sufficiency.
Because we're not in control anymore.
Exactly. When things are going great, our trust in our systems, our savings accounts, or our beliefs is entirely theoretical. We are talking about the harness. But when you are stripped of your own strength in the dark, theoretical knowledge is forced to become true intimacy.
So the valley isn't a sign that you've failed or taken a wrong turn. It's a proving ground. But that still leaves us with the sheer visceral terror of being inside the valley while we are falling. Like, how do we actually process the fear in the moment?
This is where cognitive behavioral psychology maps perfectly onto the ancient text. We have to look really closely at the concept of the shadow.
Okay, shadows.
From a psychological perspective, shadows are illusions. They have zero physical substance. They cannot bite you, they cannot hold you, they cannot hurt you.
Right.
But more importantly, a shadow absolutely requires a light source to exist.
Yeah.
You cannot cast a shadow in total darkness.
So the shadow itself is proof that light is present even if you can't see the source because those canyon walls are blocking it.
Precisely. In cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, we deal constantly with cognitive distortions. This happens when our brains take a real threat and magnify it, casting a massive, terrifying shadow on the wall of our minds.
So the fear feels real.
The fear you feel is incredibly real, but the shadow itself is a distortion. Ancient theologians actually drew a very sharp distinction here between pain and harm.
Wait, how are those different in this context? Because if I'm in the valley, pain feels pretty harmful.
I know it does. But pain is temporary suffering, which is an unavoidable reality of the human condition. Harm, in this theological framework, is ultimate eternal ruin.
Oh, I see.
So in the dark valleys of life, you will absolutely experience pain. The text doesn't promise you won't get scraped by rocks, but the promise of the shepherd's active presence ensures that you suffer no ultimate harm. The shadow might scare you, but it cannot destroy you.
Wait, if the shadow is just a cognitive distortion, how do we stop fighting it? Because telling someone with severe anxiety it's just a shadow usually doesn't calm them down at all.
No, definitely not.
It just makes them feel crazy.
And that is exactly where the neurobiology comes in, because the text doesn't say the shadow is fake, so I will fear no evil. It says, I will fear no evil, for you are with me.
Right.
The mechanism of peace isn't logic, it's presence. The phrase, you are with me, is a heavily utilized grounding technique in modern therapy. Yeah. Think about how the mammalian brain evolved. For a herd animal, isolation literally equals death. When your amygdala, the brain's fear center, detects a threat and perceives that you are alone, it floods your body with cortisol. You go into full fight, flight, or freeze.
So your brain is biochemically screaming at you to panic.
Exactly. But neurological studies show that the perceived supportive presence of another person fundamentally alters that chemical reaction.
Just knowing someone is there.
Right. The moment your brain perceives that you are not alone, Even if it's an invisible divine presence that you are simply talking to in the second person, your brain begins to release oxytocin.
Oh, wow.
And oxytocin acts as a literal chemical brake on the amygdala. It suppresses the fear response. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It is a neurological byproduct of relational proximity. Just knowing the shepherd is standing next to you chemically rewires how your brain processes the shadow.
That is wild. Think about the shadow you might be staring at right now as you listen to this. Maybe it's an impending layoff, a medical diagnosis, or a failing relationship.
Yeah, real threats.
The threat is very real, but the sheer physical presence of a guide chemically changes your ability to walk through it.
Yeah.
And this raises a massive question about the tools that guide is carrying.
Oh, the rod and staff.
Yeah, because the text says, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And frankly, if CBT is about calming the brain, how does introducing a weapon into the metaphor do anything but spike my anxiety? Like, a rod doesn't sound comforting.
It sounds totally contradictory to a modern ear, I agree.
Yeah.
Until you distinguish between these two specific tools, they serve completely different functions in ancient Near Eastern shepherding.
Okay.
The staff, or Mishnah, is the classic long, thinner stick with a hook or crook at the end. That was used for gentle guidance.
Like we see in all the pictures.
Exactly. A shepherd would lean it against the side of a sheep to guide it by touch in the dark, or use the hook to carefully lift a lamb out of a crevice.
Okay, so the staff makes total sense for comfort. Gentle touch, rescue, guidance. But what about the rod?
The rod, or shebet in Hebrew, is a short, heavy club. It usually had a knobbed end, and shepherds would literally pound bits of heavy iron into the wood.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was a brutal weapon used to beat off apex predators. But, and here's the kicker, it was also used for discipline. If a sheep was blindly wandering toward a cliff edge in the dark, the shepherd would use that heavy club to strike the sheep to turn it around.
Wait. So introducing a violent iron-knobbed club into the metaphor is supposed to bring psychological comfort? That sounds kind of abusive.
Right.
I mean, in our modern world, we define comfort as a warm blanket, a safe space, the absence of friction.
This raises an important question about our modern definition of safety, though. You have to think like a sheep in a dark, predator-filled ravine. The absolute greatest threat to your life isn't a swat from a heavy club. The greatest threat is being ignored. If a shepherd uses the rod to strike a wandering sheep, it means the shepherd is actively paying attention. A shepherd who ignores you in the valley of the shadow of death has abandoned you to die. So the discipline, while highly jarring and painful in the moment, is the ultimate proof of vigilant, protective care.
You know, that makes me think of the rumble strips on the side of a dark highway.
Oh, yeah.
If you are falling asleep at the wheel and your car starts to drift off the road, you hit those deep grooves. It is loud, it is violently jarring, it physically shakes the entire car and it spikes your adrenaline.
It jolts you awake.
Yeah, it is not a gentle experience. But that harsh, unyielding boundary is exactly what wakes you up and keeps you from quietly drifting off a cliff to your death. The violence of the rumble strip is actually a profound mechanism of safety.
That is a brilliant modern equivalent. And historical rabbinic traditions have interpreted the text exactly this way for centuries. They equate the rod with affliction or physical suffering, and the staff with the Torah, or divine instruction. The profound idea here is that even deeply painful, jarring life experiences can be a source of comfort if you recognize them as the active, protective positioning of a shepherd who absolutely refuses to let you wander into fatal harm.
Okay, so we've survived the terrifying wadi. We understand that the shadow is a cognitive distortion requiring light, our amygdala is chemically calmed by the shepherd's proximity, and we've learned to trust the jarring rumble strip of the rod.
We made it through.
Right. But surviving the valley isn't the ultimate goal of a shepherd, is it? The text uses the word Magal earlier on when it talks about being led in paths of righteousness, which literally means circles or entrenchments.
Yes, Magal.
But that's incredibly frustrating for a modern listener. If I'm following a guide through a dark canyon, I want a straight, efficient line out. I don't want to be walked in circles. Why is a spiral necessary?
Because human growth and neuroplasticity rarely operate in a straight linear line. Often we feel like we are just going around in circles in life.
Sure.
We face the same exact relational conflicts, the same financial fears, the same bad habits.
Yeah, we think we're just stuck.
Exactly. But Magal implies an upward spiral. You might be seeing the exact same familiar scenery, the same triggers. But if you are being actively led by the shepherd, you are encountering them from a higher level of maturity each time. God takes us around the block as many times as we need until the lesson is fully integrated.
It reframes the frustration of feeling stuck in a rut. You aren't stuck. You're just on the next rotation of the spiral.
Exactly.
And this spiral is leading somewhere highly specific. The scenery shifts radically as we come out of the valley, and the text says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." If I'm exhausted from the valley, just surviving feels like enough. Why the elaborate table?
Because the goal of the shepherd is never just bare survival. The goal is flourishing and nourishment. This is the ultimate VIP treatment.
VIP treatment.
God doesn't just meet you at the exit of the dark wadi, hand you a generic protein bar and a bottle of water and say, "Good job, keep moving."
Yeah.
He rolls out a lavish banquet feast. And the psychological key here is that he does it right in front of the predators. The literal enemies or the internal fears and imposter syndrome that were just hunting you in the dark are physically restrained.
They can't touch you.
Right. They are forced to watch while you sit down, completely at rest, and feast under the shepherd's absolute protection. It is total vindication.
And then we reach the final resolution of this entire journey. The text finishes with, "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life." But again, the English translation feels so passive here. Follow me. Sounds like a lost puppy just quietly meandering along behind you.
It is entirely too weak of a translation. The Hebrew root word used here for mercy is chiased, which speaks to a fierce, loyal, covenantal love.
Okay.
And it's combined with a verb, redaf, that implies being actively chased or aggressively hunted down.
Wait, hunted down by goodness? Like a predator?
Yes, but a predator of grace.
Mm.
A much more accurate sense of the Hebrew is that goodness and loving kindness will relentlessly pursue you. They will aggressively chase you down with high determination.
I love that.
You aren't just wandering through life hoping good things happen to accidentally follow in your wake. If you are in the flock, you are being actively, deliberately tracked by goodness.
So what does this all mean? If we synthesize this entire journey, from the green pastures into the claustrophobic, pitch-black canyon, getting violently nudged by the rod, and finally arriving at this vindicating banquet where we are actively tracked by mercy, it fundamentally changes how we view the hardest days of our lives.
It really does.
The whole purpose of going through that dark, terrifying canyon wasn't a punishment for doing something wrong.
Exactly. Geographically speaking, traversing the dark wadi was literally the only physical way to get from the grazed-over, depleted pasture to the fresh, new, green pasture on the other side of the mountain range. The valley is simply the required terrain for growth.
The valley isn't a punishment, it's a passage. So, as you head back into your day, let's lock in the takeaways here. First, your desires aren't bad. You are promised you won't lack what you need while you pursue them. Second, fear is often a cognitive shadow, and a shadow only exists because a light is shining somewhere just out of view.
Exactly.
Third, your brain's panic response can literally be chemically deactivated by acknowledging the presence of your guide. And finally, you are not passively wandering through life, you are being aggressively hunted down by goodness.
And, this raises one final provocative paradigm shift for everyone to mull over this week. We've spent a lot of time talking about the rod and staff as ancient historical tools.
Right.
But what if they aren't just ancient metaphors? What if the mundane, incredibly frustrating annoyances in your life right now, a red traffic light when you're already late, a suddenly delayed flight, a frozen computer screen that wipes out an hour of work, or a flat tire?
Oh man, Horst.
What if those aren't random, meaningless bad luck? What if those are the literal physical rod and staff of a shepherd who is actively nudging you, slowing you down, and positioning you exactly where you need to be to avoid a predator you can't even see?
Wow. That completely changes how I'll look at being stuck in gridlock traffic on the commute home. The universe isn't out to get you. The shepherd is just paying incredibly close attention. I want you to try and look at your current valley differently this week. Maybe the glass on that museum case really is shattered and you have exactly the gritty survival guide you need.
And that's the logic of the valley. It's not about the absence of shadows, it's about the presence of the shepherd. I hope this deep dive into Psalm 23 gave you a bit of mental space to breathe today. If this perspective helped you chill a little more or see your situation differently, I'd love to have you back. Hit that subscribe button to join us for the next verse. Thanks for hanging out, stay grounded, and I'll see you in the next one.